The Screaming Idol of Lothal. When archaeologists began excavating the ancient city of Lothal, in India's Gujarat region, they expected another modest chapter in the story of the Indus Valley civilization: kilns, beads, drainage systems, and trade goods from distant lands. What they did not expect was the sound. It began as a whisper, a thin, eerie note carried by the desert wind through the excavation trench. One of the workers traced it to a small, half-buried statue, carved from reddish terracotta and blackened by age. The figure's mouth was open wide, its features frozen in something between agony and awe. When the wind moved across its lips, it sang. At first, the sound seemed accidental, air vibrating through hollow cracks formed by time. But the pattern was too deliberate. The idol's interior was not random, it contained a spiral cavity, carved by hand, designed to catch the wind and convert it into tone. Engineers later tested replicas of the artifact. When air was blown across the lips, each produced a single, low-pitched wail that modulated with pressure, primitive, deliberate acoustics. The idol was dated to around 2200 BCE, the mature phase of the Indus Valley culture. Lothal itself was once a thriving port, connected to the Arabian Sea by ancient waterways. This civilization, famed for its urban planning and mysterious undeciphered script, had no known temples or grand statues. Its art was restrained, its religion obscure. Yet here, hidden beneath centuries of silt, was an object designed not to be seen, but heard. Mainstream archaeologists catalogued it as a ritual figurine. Perhaps, they said, the sound symbolized the breath of a god, a wind spirit, or the voice of the monsoon. But among the locals, older stories surfaced. Fishermen spoke of the idol that cries, a relic cursed by the gods of the drowned city. They claimed that in the heat of summer, when the wind shifts, its song can still be heard across the salt flats, a moan that heralds storms or sickness. One of the site's acoustic engineers, Dr. Nandita Bose, noted something strange. When measured under laboratory conditions, the idol's frequency hovered around 19 Hz, a vibration just below human hearing. Scientists call it the fear frequency. It can cause unease, nausea, and even hallucinations. It's possible, she wrote, that whoever made this idol understood sound not as art, but as power. The idea of the Indus people experimenting with infrasound seems impossible. Yet the same civilization mastered precision in brickwork, metallurgy, and hydrology. If they could control water flow to the centimeter, could they not also control air? Scholars still debate whether the idol's sound was intentional or a cosmic accident, whether its haunting hum was worship or warning. Some fringe theorists claim that Lothal was more than a trade port, it was a hub for resonant rituals, using sound to alter consciousness. They cite the idol's spiral design as symbolic of breath and energy, and the absence of temples as evidence of a more internal, sensory form of worship. A few go further still, suggesting that the idol's tone was used to communicate across distance, the way conch shells once carried calls over rivers. But those are theories born of fascination, not proof. The idol itself remains in the National Museum in Delhi, sealed behind glass. Researchers rarely demonstrate its sound now. Visitors describe feeling uneasy in its presence, even in silence. When wind passes through the ruins of Lothal today, it still carries that low, almost human resonance. It hums through the empty streets, over the dry docks and forgotten wells. To some, it is merely air in motion. To others, it is the city remembering itself, a voice carved into clay, calling through time. And if you listen carefully, beneath the drone, there is something like rhythm. A breath. A heartbeat in stone. The vanished monks of Mount Kailash. In the Tibetan highlands, where the air is thin enough to make breathing feel like prayer, rises a mountain so perfect it seems carved by gods. Its four faces catch the sun like blades of crystal, and its summit remains untouched by man. This is Mount Kailash, sacred to Buddhists, Hindus, Jains, and followers of Bon alike, a cosmic axis, they say, linking heaven and earth. Yet tucked inside the mountain's myth is a darker tale, a brotherhood of monks who vanished into its heart and never returned. The earliest written trace of them appears in a 10th-century Bon manuscript known as the Songs of the Hidden Path. It speaks of those who walked into the light within the mountain, seeking enlightenment through silence so complete that the soul could hear itself decay. When explorers found fragments of the same text centuries later in a ruined monastery near Lake Manasarovar, they took it as legend, a poetic metaphor for transcendence. But local shepherds told a different story. They spoke of chanting that echoes from the mountain's southern face, sometimes at dusk, sometimes just before a storm, though no monastery remains there. In 1939, a small expedition led by a Tibetan scholar monk named Tsering Norbu reached the western glacier caves at Kailash's base. His notes, later recovered from an abandoned tent, describe an opening as round and smooth as a throat. The team reported hearing a humming vibration, not wind, but something deeper, felt in the chest rather than the ears. They entered. Only one porter returned, frostbitten and delirious. He claimed the monks became light. Norbu's body was never found. Mainstream researchers treat the account cautiously. The region is treacherous, prone to avalanches and hypoxia. Entire teams can vanish in snow within minutes. Yet the phenomenon of low-frequency vibration is real. Geological surveys record subsonic tremors in the mountain's core, likely produced by glacier movement. The frequency, around 19 to 20 Hz, matches what psychologists call the ghost range, sound that the ear cannot hear but the body can feel. Exposure can induce unease, visions, and the sense of presence. Scholars still debate whether the ancient monks might have discovered these resonances and mistaken them for divine voices. Among Tibetans, however, the vanished monks are remembered as seekers of the inner sun. In secret Bon texts, Mount Kailash is described as hollow, containing luminous chambers where time folds upon itself. Some say the monks performed a ritual of breath and vibration, an attempt to harmonize the body's resonance with that of the mountain. If they matched, one passage warns, the flesh would melt into sound. Western mystics who later visited the region in the 20th century added their own layers. The writer Ananda Gray, claimed in 1967 to have recorded a pulse beneath the glacier, 5 beats every minute, fading when approached. Others suggest a magnetic anomaly causes compasses to spin wildly near certain caves, as if the mountain guards its geometry. The Chinese government has since restricted access to the inner valleys, citing safety concerns, but rumors persist of sealed entrances discovered by climbers, their footage confiscated at checkpoints. For believers, the mountain is a living being, its slopes the body of Shiva, its summit the seat of enlightenment. To attempt ascent is sacrilege. Perhaps the monks knew that. Perhaps their pilgrimage was never upward but inward, toward a world beneath the rock where sound becomes light and prayer becomes echo. Today, when the wind moves across Kailash's ridges, it carries a tone eerily close to human chanting. Scientists record it as harmonic resonance, pilgrims call it the voices of those who entered and did not return. Somewhere between physics and faith, the mountain hums, an unanswered question carved in ice. Scholars still debate whether the story of the vanished monks is allegory or accident, revelation or hallucination. Yet each year, new travelers circle the mountain's base, tracing its 48 kilometers of sacred path in silence, listening for that sound, a low vibration, like a heartbeat, coming from within the stone. The Serpent Vault of Angkor Thom. The ruins of Angkor Thom, deep in the Cambodian jungle, have always seemed half alive, roots clawing at towers, vines swallowing faces of stone, the jungle humming with memory. Once the imperial heart of the Khmer Empire, its temples drew the devotion of millions. But hidden beneath that devotion is a story so strange, even the modern archaeologists who found its traces speak of it in whispers: the Serpent Vault, a sealed subterranean chamber said to guard something not meant for eyes or breath. The first hint appeared in 2012, when LiDAR scans of Angkor revealed patterns of buried structures beyond the temple grid. Beneath the Bayon complex, famous for its smiling stone faces, researchers detected a rectangular cavity, 30 meters long, perfectly symmetrical, sealed beneath centuries of sandstone. When excavations began, they found carvings unlike anything in Angkorian art, intertwined serpents, each biting the tail of another, spiraling endlessly around an unseen center. The inscriptions near the entrance were in a script older than classical Khmer, possibly Pahlava, and crudely translated as, "The coils hold what must not rise." It sounded like myth, a warning meant to sanctify empty stone. But deeper in, they found evidence of deliberate sealing, layers of resin, mercury traces, and compacted clay designed to trap air. A vault made airtight by ancient hands. When the final slab was breached, the team reported a hiss, pressure release, perhaps, but the air that escaped carried a strange metallic tang. 2 workers fainted. Others said they heard a low vibration, like thunder far underground. Mainstream archaeologists dismissed the reaction as panic and suffocation. Yet what they found inside unsettled even the rational. The chamber was bare, save for a single pedestal supporting a black granite urn encased in bronze bands. The urn's lid was fused shut by corrosion, but on its surface were dozens of small serpent etchings, their eyes inlaid with jade. The project's leader, Dr. Sok Weissel, ordered the artifact removed to Phnom Penh for analysis. Within a month, the vault was resealed. Within 2, Dr. Weissel resigned from the project without explanation. Unconfirmed reports from his assistants tell of the urn emitting faint heat and vibration when exposed to humidity, like a living thing breathing under metal. The lab notes, later leaked, mention an interior resonance near 17 Hz, low enough to unsettle the human body. One technician claimed to hear whispers when the urn was placed in darkness. The object was quietly transferred to storage, and the site around the vault was closed under the pretext of preservation. For Cambodians, the serpent motif is ancient, older than Angkor, older even than India's Naga cults. The serpent, in Khmer cosmology, bridges worlds, it lives in water but rules beneath it, guarding the underearth. Some legends speak of Naga princesses who taught early kings the secrets of empire, others of coils encircling a sleeping god. To disturb that coil was to invite imbalance, a flood not of water but of memory. Fringe theorists seized on the find, calling it the Khmer Pandora's box. They speculated it was a containment vessel, perhaps holding quicksilver, or something more symbolic, knowledge, energy, or even disease. Their favorite detail, traces of mercury found along the chamber walls. Mercury was sacred to ancient alchemists, believed to represent the soul in fluid form. Similar mercury pools were discovered beneath Mexico's Teotihuacan, another city built for gods. Coincidence, or connection? Scholars still debate whether these rituals were metaphors or technologies of control. Today, access to the Serpent Vault site is heavily restricted. Jungle growth has reclaimed the path, and the entrance sits under meters of soil. Visitors to Angkor Thom pass within meters of it without knowing. The temples above gleam with serene faces, unaware, or perhaps pretending not to know, what sleeps below. Some nights, locals say, when the monsoon thunder rolls, the ground trembles just enough to rattle loose stones. They call it the breathing of the serpent. Whether that sound is the earth settling or something shifting in the dark, no one dares to dig again. Scholars still debate whether the vault's serpent carvings were mythic warning, structural decoration, or coded record of catastrophe. But the message etched across its walls remains clear: the coils hold what must not rise. The Oracle Caves of Crete. Beneath the sun-drenched hills of Crete, where olive trees shimmer like silver and the wind carries the smell of salt and thyme, there lies a labyrinth not carved by minotaurs, but by silence. Hidden deep within Mount Ida, long believed to be the birthplace of Zeus, archaeologists have found acoustic caves that whisper, hum, and answer their own echoes. Ancient myths called them the Oracle Caves, places where priestesses could hear the gods. But what modern researchers discovered suggests something far stranger: the caves might actually have been built to make people hear things that weren't there. In 2004, a team from the Hellenic Institute of Speleology mapped a network of caverns known locally as the Ida Ion Antron. What drew their attention wasn't the artifacts, bronze bowls, votive figurines, animal bones, but the sound. When they spoke inside the main chamber, their voices multiplied, splitting into harmonics that shifted with even the smallest movement. At one specific frequency, around 111 Hz, the entire space vibrated as if the rock itself were alive. The effect was hypnotic, even disorienting. Ancient writers hinted at such mysteries. The poet Hesiod described the singing stones of the gods, and later Greek chroniclers wrote of voices rising from the navel of the earth. The cave's resonance could explain why it was revered as a place of prophecy long before the Oracle of Delphi rose to fame. Here, unlike Delphi, there was no temple, no incense, no priestly order, only the voice of the cave. Mainstream archaeologists believe the resonance was a natural phenomenon amplified by ritual. People may have used chanting, drums, or horns to trigger trance states, mistaking the resulting auditory distortions for divine communication. Yet one detail resists simple explanation: the architecture. The inner chambers appear subtly shaped, walls smoothed and angles aligned to specific sound paths. Laser mapping revealed symmetrical curves that focus sound like a cathedral's apse, even though the site predates organized architecture by millennia. Scholars still debate whether the cave was merely adapted by humans or engineered with a purpose. The precision suggests intention. Could the Minoans, those enigmatic seafarers who built palaces before the Greeks themselves, have understood acoustic geometry? And if so, what did they use it for? In 2010, British acoustic researcher Paul Devereux led an experiment inside the cave, replicating ancient chants using reconstructed double-reed flutes. The sound rolled through the chambers, building into overtones that felt physical, pressure waves striking the chest, causing mild euphoria and trembling. Several participants reported sensing presences or seeing shadows in light that weren't moving. One described hearing whispers responding to her own voice in languages she did not know. The recordings captured nothing unusual, except for faint low-frequency pulses that occurred only during silence. Fringe theorists call this the voice of the stone, suggesting that the cave's resonance could modulate consciousness, perhaps even act as a primitive form of sound-based ritual technology. Others go further, linking the frequency to brainwave states associated with meditation or altered awareness. It's tempting to romanticize a prehistoric sound machine designed to speak with gods, but the evidence remains ambiguous. Still, one fact endures: whoever worshipped here understood how to build sound. Local legend adds its own layers. Shepherds say on certain nights the cave calls, producing tones that drift across the valley. Animals refuse to enter when it happens. Some villagers recall an old belief that the cave is a living mouth, Zeus's breath moving through stone. When storms roll over the mountain, the thunder seems to echo from underground. Visitors are now limited to the outer chambers, as deeper entry was banned after a 2012 landslide. Officially, the site is closed for stabilization. Unofficially, it said that members of a research team who ventured too far inside became disoriented and vanished from radio contact for hours. When found, they could not explain where they had been, only that the cave had stopped breathing, and the silence felt alive. Scholars still debate whether the oracle caves represent the earliest form of sonic ritual, mass hallucination, or sacred architecture tuned to human perception. But even now, when wind crosses the entrance at the right angle, the mountain hums. It's easy to see why people once believed that beneath this island, the gods themselves were listening. The Cursed Library of Ashur. In the dusty plains of northern Iraq, the city of Ashur once stood as the beating heart of the Assyrian Empire, a civilization of kings and conquerors, of gods carved in winged stone. Its temples have long since crumbled, its ziggurats eroded to stumps, but buried beneath its ruins lies a secret far darker than empire, a collection of clay tablets known only by whispers among scholars as the Cursed Library. It began in 1899, when German archaeologist Walter Andre uncovered the remains of what he believed was an administrative archive. Among the usual records, tax accounts, hymns, and contracts, he found a sealed stone chest inscribed with a single cuneiform phrase: "He who opens this learns fire." The tablets inside were fused together, blackened as though burned from within. When touched, the clay flaked apart, releasing a faint sulfur smell. Most were unreadable. A few bore signs of deliberate defacement, names scratched out, symbols distorted. And yet, amid the fragments, one was whole, an unassuming tablet whose translation would haunt every scholar who dared to read it. The text, written in Old Akkadian, described an instruction to call down divine fire. It spoke of a ritual performed not by priests, but by scribes, those who wrote with the heat of heaven. The words were technical, almost mechanical, the construction of a vessel, the arrangement of metals, the invocation of Enlil through flame. It read less like prayer, more like formula. At first, the find was hailed as a curiosity, perhaps an allegory for metallurgy or temple offerings. But within months, André fell ill. His journals mention recurring dreams of letters glowing red like embers, and voices urging him to finish the translation. He stopped sleeping. When he died suddenly in 1915, the tablet was sealed in Berlin's Pergamon Museum archives. Decades later, in 1987, Assyriologist Dr. Layla Haddad reopened the study. Using infrared scanning, her team discovered that the tablet's lines contained an odd sequence of repeated symbols, forming a spiral pattern unseen in other texts. When traced onto a flat surface, the spiral produced concentric loops resembling an energy diagram. Curious, Haddad recited one of the hymnal verses aloud for a documentary interview. Mid-recording, the studio's lights flickered. The segment was never aired. Mainstream historians attribute such stories to coincidence and superstition, old clay, electrical faults, exhaustion. But within academic circles, the Cursed Library gained reputation as a collection that does not want to be read. Several researchers who attempted digital translation reported inexplicable data loss, files corrupted, text rearranged. One archivist claimed to hear low humming from the sealed storage cases after hours, like heat expanding metal. What makes the library truly unique, however, is context. Ashur was not just a religious city, it was a knowledge center where scribes experimented with language, math, and astronomy. Some scholars now think the tablets may have contained ritualized science, formulas blending prayer with proto-chemistry. They speak of the book that teaches fire, perhaps a poetic term for the mastery of metallurgy or weaponry. Others, more cautiously, suggest something psychological, words so powerful within their worldview that reading them induced fear strong enough to seem real. Fringe theorists, of course, go further. They claim the Cursed Library housed forbidden instructions, an Assyrian attempt to control lightning or divine energy. They point to the tablet's spiral as evidence of ancient electromagnetism, citing similar patterns found in Sumerian and Egyptian iconography. Scholars still debate whether such patterns were symbolic or technological, metaphysical or metaphorical. Whatever the truth, the tablets remain sealed. The few that escaped the archives during wartime looting in 2003 have never resurfaced. Locals around Ashur whisper that those who handled them met the breath of fire, an illness that begins with fever and ends in silence. Today, the ruins of Ashur rest quietly beside the Tigris, their stones still warm at dusk. The desert wind carries faint whispers through broken doorways, as if the words trapped inside those tablets are still echoing, searching for someone reckless enough to listen. Scholars still debate whether the library's curse was divine punishment or self-fulfilling myth, whether humans feared what they discovered or invented fear to keep it sealed. But perhaps the warning on that stone chest remains the most honest line ever written in clay: "He who opens this learns fire." The copper skull of the Andes. In the thin, icy air of the Andes Mountains, 14,000 feet above sea level, where even the strongest lungs burn with every breath, a group of miners unearthed something that did not belong to this world. It was 1972, near the Bolivian-Peruvian border, and the men were widening an old silver shaft when one of their pickaxes struck metal, not vein, but something smooth and curved. When they brushed away the dust, they revealed a human skull, plated entirely in copper alloy, gleaming with unnatural brightness despite its impossible age. At first, they thought it a relic from a forgotten burial, some pre-Incan warrior's grave ornament. But the skull's condition defied logic. The copper coating was seamless, fused not over bone but into it. Later X-ray imaging would show that the alloy had penetrated the cranial sutures, forming a conductive mesh beneath the bone surface. It was not hammered or poured, it was grown. The find was sent to La Paz for study, then quietly transferred to a private laboratory in Lima. The radiocarbon analysis of organic residue dated it to roughly 1200 BCE, centuries before the rise of the Inca. Metallurgy of that sophistication should not have existed in the Andes at that time. The alloy's composition, copper, tin, and trace amounts of silver, was unlike any known pre-Columbian formula. Its inner surface bore microetchings resembling symbols, repeating spirals and intersecting lines that some researchers compared to Nazca patterns. Mainstream archaeologists offered a cautious explanation. Perhaps it was a ceremonial headpiece or burial mask that corroded into the skull over centuries of contact. Others suggested accidental preservation through mineral leaching. Yet the pattern was too symmetrical, the fusion too intentional. And then there was the magnetism. In 1974, when the artifact was tested again, researchers recorded a residual magnetic field, faint, pulsing, measurable. The skull behaved like a low-strength magnet, its polarity shifting slightly over time. Instruments malfunctioned nearby. The team lead, Dr. Ernesto Chavez, wrote in his notes, "It's as if it remembers lightning." Locals already had stories about the region. They spoke of the sons of thunder, spirits of the mountain who wore masks of the storm. Some miners refused to work near the find spot afterward, claiming they felt vibrations in the ground. A shaman from a nearby Aymara village was brought in to perform cleansing rites. He called the artifact the Watcher's Head. His warning was simple: do not return it to the mountain. It was buried to rest. Fringe theorists seized upon the magnetic readings. To them, the skull was proof of ancient technology, a bioelectrical interface, perhaps a form of ceremonial enhancement. They noted how copper has long been associated with conduction, healing, and the transmission of energy. Some claimed it was evidence of neurometallurgy, a lost practice merging biology and metal. Others suggested extraterrestrial origin, citing the same magnetic anomalies that later confounded compasses in Nazca and Tiwanaku. More measured voices proposed a symbolic purpose. In Andean belief, the skull was the seat of ancestral power. To cover it in metal might have been to preserve spirit, not body. The magnetic field could have arisen from copper oxidation interacting with trace iron in the bone, producing a weak current. Scholars still debate whether this explanation satisfies the mystery or merely comforts it. In 2009, the skull resurfaced in a European private collection, where a team from the University of Geneva re-examined it using modern imaging. Their report confirmed something earlier teams had missed: the copper lattice mirrored neural pathways. It followed the same patterns as human cranial nerves, almost like a map of thought fossilized in metal. The researchers stopped short of calling it deliberate, but one line in the report stands out: if designed, it implies knowledge of anatomy centuries ahead of its time. No one knows who the copper skull belonged to. Its eyes, now hollow, seem almost aware. When light hits its surface, reflections dance like veins of flame. Visitors who've seen it behind glass say the air around it feels charged, as if the skull itself is still alive in some slow, metallic way, thinking, remembering, waiting. Scholars still debate whether it's an impossible artifact or a miracle of chemistry. But for those who've heard its story, one thing is certain: in the Andes, even the dead can hum with the memory of storms. Conclusion. Across 10 enigmas scattered through time, from idols that scream to mountains that breathe, from skulls that hum to temples that bleed silence, one truth endures: the past has never stopped speaking. It murmurs through stone, vibration, and myth, waiting for us to listen. Each mystery we uncover reveals not just what ancient civilizations knew, but what they feared. That knowledge itself has weight, and sometimes, consequence. We are drawn to these secrets because they mirror our own hunger for meaning, our need to peer behind the veil. Yet the deeper we look, the more the past looks back. Perhaps that is why these stories were buried, not out of ignorance, but mercy. In the end, the greatest mystery isn't what was lost, but why it was hidden. And still, we dig, knowing that some answers are not meant to be found.